Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Doctor Who, as well as the latest episode of Charmed. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I could have time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Doctor Who, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Charmed. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Doctor Who. A great episode with a lot of interesting things that went down in this episode. Obviously, this episode deals with the team going back to 1955, in particular, Montgomery, where they run into Rosa Parks. It always kind of like messes with my head a little bit anytime like the show takes place in the US, which it has from time to time. I'm sure there's probably been a more recent time, but the last time I can think of it was like Series 6's premiere, because that took place in the US. So it just kind of catches me off guard a little bit, because it's so weird, because it's mainly like a British show, so it just kind of catches me off guard. And that's actually kind of an interesting thing to kind of delve into it in this episode, because they're like, oh, you know who Rosa Parks is? And Ryan's like, oh yeah, she's the first black lady to drive the bus, right? And they're like, no. And it's like, well, he's like, well, it's U.S. history, so I don't really know. And to me, that's an interesting thing in itself, because I'm like, that's always my thing. As an American, like, it's always like, what is history like for other countries? Like, obviously there's going to be some similarities, but also like history is told through perspective. I've always gotten the American perspective. Obviously there's world history, so you kind of get like a generalized, but even then that's kind of like, like, what is history like through another country, another continent, and just places in general, like other different places. So that kind of feeds into that, because it's like, oh yeah, what would like people from Europe really know about American history? I mean, to be fair, the Rosa Parks situation is massive. It isn't just like an American thing. That affected everyone. That changed everything across the world. And I think that was a good job of them kind of emphasizing that, just kind of bring that little bit up, but it kind of also emphasized like, yeah, it doesn't matter where you're from, like you should kind of know about it. Anyway, it is kind of that tough situation for Ryan and Yaz, because it's kind of like, it's like this place sucks, and it's like not even what Rosa did was enough to kind of get rid of racism or anything. But even Yaz is like, yeah, that might be true, but the fact of the matter is what she did leaps and bounds. Like, look at me, I'm a cop. Like, I would not have had that opportunity if it wasn't for what Rosa did. It's just, the leaps and bounds. What seemed like one small act changed everything for so many people. And that's, interestingly enough, like what the main part of this episode is about. Because I was wondering, is it going to be something alien technically? It's like, no, it's just some douchebag time traveler is like, oh, I want to change it. It's like a racist time traveler. Interesting. He was actually in a prison. What was it? Storm cage. Which is interesting, and like, because it's like we don't really get the specifics of why he got locked up, but he talks about like, oh, I've killed a few people, hundreds, 1,000 at best, and it's like he has a smirk and everything. It's like, yeah, you can tell this dude's a sociopath. But now it's like you understand, because interestingly enough, well, multiple interesting things. One, the actor playing him is the actor who played Daniel in the TV show Revenge. He was also in a very short-lived TV show called Time After Time, because he played what was essentially Jack the Ripper in that show. That's kind of interesting too, because obviously you can tell this character is kind of a sociopath, and that character was too. But also, like, there's two things dealing with time travel that he's in. That's just kind of interesting. It wasn't until Time After Time that I found out that actor was British. I had no idea, because he does a really good American accent. But yeah, he's just a dick, like, because he's got this neural restrictor in his brain, because he literally got out of this big. It's like, isn't it like? It's a pretty big prison in this universe, is kind of what the doctor was saying. And I also like the doctor's reaction to him, because she's like, oh, I know exactly what your situation is. She breaks his time device, and he starts choking her, but then he casts a stop because of the restrictor in his head, which is kind of like, man, like, the doctor's quick to do brazen things, but I thought in that moment, it's like, whoa, it's just kind of like, I got you figured out, I got you beat, I know you can't do anything. One of my favorite scenes in the episode too, it's like when they get kicked out of that place, and Graham's like, oh, we're going to get something to eat, right? He's like, this always happens. It's kind of like, oh, we're about to eat something, but then we don't, I guess is what he's kind of implying, which is so interesting. And even Ryan's like, really, dude, we just got kicked out of the restaurant and you're tripping about that? He's just, I'm just saying, we haven't eaten, I need to eat regularly. Even the whole situation of like, oh, we're 1955. Graham's like, oh, can we see Elvis Presley? It's like, no, but I guess I could, if you want to talk to him, I can always just call him up. He's like, you can talk to Elvis Presley. It's like, yeah, don't you tell anybody that I gave him that mobile phone. She's like, why are you giving Elvis a mobile phone? Like, the Doctor does some very strange things. But to be fair, because the Doctor has connections with people like that, that's how she kind of, well, the Doctor in general has known, like, oh yeah, these people have contacted the Doctor in the past, like, oh, for help. So it kind of makes knowing where to go, typically, where the right place to go. Interesting enough, that does play a part in this episode, because once again, the TARDIS takes you where you need to be, not necessarily 100% where you want to go. Because in this regard, because it also turns out, because the Doctor's like, oh, come on, this is like the 9th time, and Graham had a corrector being like, no, this is like the 12th time. It's like, you can't control this thing, can you? It's like, yeah, of course I can. Sometimes it just happens to not be one of those times. And I love Graham being like, hey, what are you doing marking on the wall like that? Who do you think you are, Banksy? And she's like, who says I'm not? And then, like, she erases it with the sonic screwdriver, and she's like, huh, see Banksy do that. Or do I? Kind of, like, and the look on her face when she's saying it so serious, almost like she could be Banksy. I just thought that was, like, I love, as these episodes progress, you get more and more of her personality kind of shining through like that. Kind of, like, I don't know. I don't know. It's just, I really love that aspect of her personality. Kind of being like, am I this person or am I not? I'm so mysterious. I don't know. It's just, it's funny because even Graham's like, wait, is she? I don't know whether she is or not. There's also that moment where Ryan met, Martin Luther King, and he said, oh my God, Martin Luther King, you're amazing. And then when Rosa Parks was like, Ryan, he's like, yes, Rosa Parks. He has to stop. He's like, I just said Rosa Parks. I'm talking to Rosa Parks. This is the coolest thing ever. And he's just kind of like nerding out a little bit. I thought that was kind of a pretty nice touch too. That temporal displacement device is also an interesting thing. Basically, it flings you to whatever point in time is set when a person hits it for you. Like, some of the stuff he was hitting was sent to the future, which is interesting. Like, what was he planning on doing by just saying, I mean, I knew it was going to just simply get them out of the way. To be fair, it's like, well, it's also his way of not killing him because he can't hurt anybody. So I guess at the same time, it's kind of like, that's the safest thing, is to send him to the future. I was like, I wonder what the time setting was for that. Because when Ryan uses it on him later, which I love Ryan being like, oh, good job, Ryan. Thanks, Ryan, to himself. Doing that, it ends up sending him far into the past. So, it's stuff like that. It makes you go, will we cross paths with him again or not? I think the last time we saw a device like that, the one he uses to time travel, wasn't that Jack? Jack is one of the last few people I remember distinctly having a device like that. I remember that kind of being a whole part of his story. But I don't know, maybe I'm just remembering that wrong, because remember that's super early in the series, and I don't have as clear-cut memory of early Doctor Who as I would like to, because I need to go back and rewatch a lot of early Doctor Who. But I also love when they first come across a suitcase, like, Ryan's like, should we open it? And the Doctor's like, that is a great question. That's the right question to ask. And she's like, okay, is everyone getting excited? Because I'm excited. And Graham's like, well, you won't be as excited if it turns out there's a bomb in there. She's like, come on, Graham, don't kill the vibe. And it's just like I said, I love her personality so much. She's like, dude, this is going to be awesome. Don't ruin this for me. Also, another fascinating thing about this episode is that dude Cresco knows about the TARDIS. He's like, oh, that's a TARDIS, isn't it? And she's like, and the Doctor's like, yeah, and what if it is? What is it to you? And he's like, it can be worth a lot of money. She's like, what? No, I mean, well, it could be worth a lot if he sold it or whatever. And she's like, what? No, that one it's secondhand used, plus, like, it's got a lot of mileage on it, plus one reckless driver. So, which is just interesting, because you never really hear too many people talk about knowing what it is. I feel like unless you're a Gallifreyan, you really wouldn't know it. But I guess that speaks volumes of just, like, the reach of the Time Lords. I mean, I don't know a lot of Doctor Who history, so I don't really remember it ever really coming up too much about TARDISes. So not unless they're not, because I mean, I guess all across time, whatever point in time in history he's from, like, TARDISes are enough known, because I feel like that's something. Because no one, now that I think about it, like, in the entire series, I don't think I've ever really heard anyone go, oh my God, that's a TARDIS? Like, unless you met with the Doctor and know the Doctor, you wouldn't know that's a TARDIS. You think that, like everyone else is a police boss, but he knew exactly what it was, so. I think that's just kind of an interesting detail. I hope they elaborate on that more by being like, oh yeah, like, as you go further, like, at certain points, it's like, oh my God, that's a TARDIS. So it's like, why do all these people know what a TARDIS is? So, maybe they're kind of very valuable things in the future, because they are discovered by people and like, oh my God, look at this TARDIS on display. It's amazing. Time travel all over the place. Plus, TARDISes are very fickle, at least the one the Doctor has, because she kind of has a mind of her own. So she kind of does her own thing. So. But like I said, in general, I think they did a very good job. This is me kind of focusing on the levity of the episode, but I think they did a good job kind of like keeping up with the severity of the situation too, because it's that thing of like I said, you've never had someone just actively trying to destroy time in this regard, because for him, because he can't hurt anyone, he has to do enough to nudge time, because all it takes is one little nudge in his direction kind of sends domino effects down the way, and things kind of go in a change heavily off course, because he was trying it multiple times. I love it when Ryan and Graham were trying to scare the mess with the bus driver enough to be like, oh yeah, we're messing around at your fishing spot, and say that there's going to be this what was it, the whole thing like, oh, going to be a whole bunch of black people riding the bus, so that you have no choice, to force the bus driver to go like, okay, I'm going to do this. And then Graham goes for a fist bump, and he goes boom, and Ryan looks at him and is like, don't do that, and just leaves Graham, and he's just kind of like, okay. And I'm like, oh, come on, Ryan, don't be a dick. But it's that time traveler situation of like, they had to be there, they had to be part of history, which is cool in one regard, but at the same time, it sucks big time, because even Graham's like, I don't want to be part of history, especially this history, because the doctor was like, we can't do anything, like whatever happens to her, we have to sit here and just let it happen, because it's like they're trying to make sure that time stays the way it does, because you would want to change an event like that to work out differently, but it's like, if it wasn't for her self-sacrifice in that situation, like, your world wouldn't be where it is right now, so they have to sit there and let it happen. But because she talked to different people, she talked to Ryan about it, and Ryan was trying to tell her like, at the end of the day, it will get better, it won't be perfect. And even the whole situation with Yaz of like, letting her know like, oh, I'm a police officer, I'm not where I want to be in charge and stuff, but it's like she keeps fighting for like that better tomorrow. It's what Rosa does. So, and even and it's something I never really knew too much too, because I'm not much of a history buff, knowing how like that her life still, I mean, you can figure it as much, because it's like, it's not something that's going to change overnight. Like it's a very lengthy process. There were many steps to get to where we are today. Like, even like Ryan said, the world's not perfect, but it's a lot better than it was. But the fact is, like, so much of her life, losing her job, her husband losing his job, like, life was still hard for them, but kind of being recognized as kind of the icon that she is by, was it like 99 was what I think the doctor was saying. And even to the point, even in the universe, there's an asteroid named after her too, kind of showing you just how impactful she is in general. Like, and that's the beauty of this whole situation, of just like one small act, like I said, can change everything. That's the beauty of this whole thing. And I think it's a very nice job they did kind of recognizing that too. Because I think it was a nice touch to making it so it wasn't like some alien thing came in to change it. It's like, no, it's one dick with like a time traveling device trying to screw with history, because that he's just a racist douchebag. So like I said, I'm curious to see if anything else comes about that, or very least the prison storm cage that he was in. That might come back in some shape or form, especially because they make such a note of like, oh, the tattoo he has that represents that he was there as well, so we'll see if any of that comes back in the long front. So I am curious, because this is all about them getting back home and everything, which once again, they've not been like, yeah, let's go on more adventures. It's more like, oh, we wound up here once again because we need to be. So whether the next stop is actually home or somewhere else, we'll just have to wait and see. But I'm very excited to see what the next episode has in store for us. And now moving on to this week's episode of Charmed. Quite a few things went down this episode, so let's break everything down. So first of all, I really like this entire episode. Like, the main kind of centerfold for it was kind of Maggie's ability, even though she was the one that felt like the most like all about her ability, because, Macy's got the whole telekinesis and Mel can freeze time. So it's like, oh man, I don't have the super cool ability, but her ability comes in handy. I mean, to be fair, it's kind of like, it kind of messes with her, because it's like she can't help but know what everyone's thinking. Also, it makes having sex super awkward, and just the entire time her Brian being like, oh, don't look at her boobs, don't look at her boobs, oh, I love her boobs and everything. It's just kind of like weird, and he's just like, oh, I love her so much, I gotta get her back. It's just hearing every single thought. Also thought was kind of interesting, it's like they ended up touching her like because she was wearing gloves, and she was hoping that that would prevent her ability. But to me, like, I immediately started thinking, like, is that supposed to represent the fact is because her ability kind of radiates, touching people helps focus it, but maybe eventually she can kind of just do it without having to touch people. It probably will always be a touch people thing, but that just immediately went through my brain. I mean, it's also magic, so I guess it doesn't like, I don't know, like, because I think it's more than just a physical touch. It's more like when you touch someone in some shape or form, the magic is like it circulates from your body and enters that person's mind or their heart, so you can feel, sense what they're feeling. So, but that ends up being a key component in this episode because the sisters themselves are split because obviously the message they got last episode / this episode, don't trust Harry. So do we trust Harry or do we trust the board? But it's like the board's got to be mom. And I thought it was such an interesting thing because Mel was the one that's the most like, no, it's mom. And you could tell she was almost offended when it's like, wait, you trust, like, Maggie, you trust Macy over me? Because it's like, and it's something that even Macy talks about. It's like she feels like a stranger and outsider. And I think even Mel kind of played into that this episode by being like, no. Like, it's like we're sisters and everything. We don't really know her. Like, you just see the looks that it's like, oh, you're working on that. Well, also it's just because, and they end up talking about it too. It's like Mel and Macy are they're very stubborn. They kind of, each one thinks they're right. And so, they have someone challenging them because Maggie's like right in the middle. Because at first she sides with Macy, so that's kind of a blow to like Mel's ego. But so she's kind of, and it's there's so much. I keep going all over the place, so I do apologize. But it fits so well because she's the most timid amongst the siblings because she cares so much about what other people think. Like that got brought up last episode, and I talked about it. It was like how like all her powers kind of her reading people's minds and empathy comes from the fact is that she, on some level, maybe it's just because like she's so insecure and wants to know what everyone kind of thinks about her, that she has a tendency to kind of let other people kind of run her over because it's like, oh, like when it came to that argument, it was kind of Mel versus Macy. Like I said, she just kind of got trapped in the middle. And it was kind of interesting because Harry ends up telling her later on, all you have to do is focus on yourself, believe in yourself, have more confidence, and you can overshadow other people's voices, which is so interesting because maybe, and that comes down to also controlling her powers by kind of not being so overwhelmed with what other people like. She's able to use her own voice to kind of push everyone's away. So it's a lot easier to control her ability because she was the last one to really have trouble because obviously Macy learned pretty quickly. Mel kind of learned hers pretty quickly with the whole Nico situation last episode. So I thought that was pretty neat. Just like I said, and just how that was all happening because like Maggie was like the one that was kind of like, no, I don't know. This doesn't feel right. Because Mel amongst anyone is kind of interesting because Maggie talks about how like Mel had the closest relationship with their mom. They said they talked about everything. And it's like, that's why this whole situation hits her the hardest. Because, and I'm not saying that it doesn't hit the others hard, but like her and her mom had a special connection. And it's just, let's not forget, she was the one that was the most adamant about like, no, there's more to this murder. And I think that's kind of why, because for her, it's not just like, oh, I lost my mom, I lost my best friend type of situation. And for her, it's like she's the one that held on the longest. Like I said, the whole like, oh yeah, I know something more happened with mom's murder, and she was right. And I think that plus just the desperation to be with your mom again. Even, eventually Maggie kind of had it because even it's kind of like everything kind of spiraling out. So it's like, oh, you need mom's advice. Like they don't have their mom to turn to. And even Macy eventually gives into it because like the thought of she kind of makes it seem like she doesn't want to know. She doesn't care. It's like nothing she said will be good enough. But the moment like fake mom's in front of her and everything, it kind of makes her go, no, I want to know. Like, I need to know. Like, and she became so consumed in it too. Like she saw what she wanted to see, much like Mel, but because Maggie sees into people's heads, in people's hearts because of her being like the empath that she is. And she couldn't tell what their mom was feeling because she's actually the ultimate nemesis for someone like that, who like a demon, low-level demon like that, who plays on people's emotions. They can get inside of your head, so they know exactly what to say to kind of make you think, oh, I'm this real person. Like, so I thought that was just kind of an interesting aspect to the entire episode in that regard. I love the whole like trying to determine like who do you trust? Do you trust? Because like Harry wiping that lady's memories and stuff like that, it does look a little suspicious. He didn't help himself in some regard. I also love that they nickname him Meghan Markle because it's like, oh, Meghan Markle she married a Harry who's a Brit, and he's a Harry who's a Brit. So it's like, hey, um, I even love it later on when they're like, "Oh, Meghan Markle," and he's like, "What is that?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah, it's your new nickname." What? It's just so we don't have to say, every time we say your name, you pop up. It's like, what? He's like, "No, I pop up when you say my name, Harry, with purpose." He's like, "I don't show up every time you just casually say my name, Harry." It's like, it'd be weird if I did. And I love that you add that in there because it's like it's a stipulation, like they should know that immediately. So I thought that was kind of like a little nice touch in that regard. It happened this episode, but also the little aspect of like, I forgot that didn't happen a lot in the original, did it? The whole like the Book of Shadows turning immediately to what they need it to. I think it did from time to time. I think it's like one of those things that probably kind of like, well, since I'm talking about it, Doctor Who, like the TARDIS takes the Doctor where the Doctor needs to be, not necessarily where the Doctor wants to be 100%. So I think maybe the Book of Shadows kind of does the same thing. Like when you have a strong enough urge, it's kind of like, oh yeah, like you want to know this. Or maybe in general, like I said, I don't remember, because I feel like a lot of times they always had to turn the pages. They always had to search for what they wanted to. So maybe that's kind of like a more like, oh, this might be a different take on the Book of Shadows in that regard. So that'd be kind of interesting. Also, them doing training. I don't remember. I feel like there was some training stuff here and there, but I don't remember it. I don't know, being so like, I mean, because I know there's some stuff here and there where like they had to learn how to control their powers and stuff like that, but I don't remember if it was ever expressed as like, oh, like I'm gonna be training you girls, I don't think Leo ever trained them. Like, I think they kind of had to figure stuff out on their own, didn't they? It was kind of, I don't know, like I said, stuff I'm not remembering as clearly. So I really love that Nico accidentally ended up drinking the truth serum. I was a complete and utter idiot because I forgot that was what was in there. I'm like, isn't that black blob goo thing in there? It's like, oh, no, that's the truth serum. Right. I was being a complete and utter idiot about it. But I love that Nico kind of going off on the truth and everything like that. Even being like, oh, I know, honestly, I don't even need these glasses. I just wear this. It was like, oh, look at me. I'm hot. Why do I even hide it? And then admitting that she hooked up with her fiance. And it's like, oh, well, ex-fiance. It's like, oh, yeah, you were still together when we met and everything like that. And it's like, oh, she subsequently hit. I mean, sad. Well, luckily, at the end of it all, Nico doesn't remember any of that talk about like anything she said when she was kind of spilling the truth to everyone that would listen. What's also interesting, it seems like you don't need to ask a question for the truth to come out. Just a moment you see someone, you involuntarily want to say any truths, I guess, that you've been backing up and just lying, or at the very least keeping buried deep inside. It's like the truth has to come out through the surface, I guess is how that works, which is interesting. But I do love that obviously this is like bringing the sisters closer together in this regard, because like I thought that was kind of sad, like the whole like, but you could definitely feel it, like the whole like Mel Macy feeling like an outsider, which is, I mean, yeah, it's like these are your half sisters. I don't remember if they ever played with that a lot, and I know in the beginnings when Paige was there, I don't remember if that continued a lot, which this might be one of the last episodes you really see that, because this is a lot more like no, we're kind of moving past that. We're sisters and all that. Because for her, it's like, yeah, you two grew up together. Like you had this sisterly bond. She was kind of on her own. I mean, to be fair, we don't know too much about her adopted family too, like in that regard. Well, I mean, we heard a little bit here and there, but not a lot. And there's still also the big question of like, well, who's the dad? I mean, we still don't know any. Once again, I think I brought this up last episode too. We don't know anything about Mel and Maggie's dad, but we definitely don't know anything about Macy's dad. I mean, dad in the case of like biological dad, because her adopted dad was like, oh yeah, this is your real mom. He told her everything before he passed. Or was that her mom that did that? I think it was her dad. She said last episode that did that. Poor Harry got the smack beat out of him this episode too. Now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, just because it's like, it's also interesting because I don't remember White Lighters being so on the offense, like him holding a knife against him. I'm like, whoa, that's great. Because it seemed, because I always like White Lighters are always like super passive to me. I don't know. I feel like I don't remember any White Lighters really doing anything fighting wise. Like the only ones I could think of are like Chris and Leo on occasion. That's about it. So I don't know. That was just kind of rambling through my mind in that regard. So maybe we kind of see more of that. So what was also interesting too is that they've immediately set up like a dangerous weapon, and that is the prism. I really thought that was kind of interesting. Like, oh man, this is an item that will steal your powers. I did like that whole like kind of other dimension, like mirrored world that they went into. That was kind of pretty dope. I just like the aesthetic of that too. I wonder, I mean, because to be fair, like it's designed where it's meant to be only the charmed ones could even get out. So there might be a use for that in some shape or form in the future. Like, I guess when it's all said and done, it could be potentially a means of like, oh, once it's all said and done, which I don't know if you're ever done with this world. The original Charm ones never really got done. It just got passed on to the next generation. But the whole aspect of like maybe once they save the world and don't they needed to stop the apocalypse, they could take away their power so they're no longer burdened by that responsibility. But like I said, that's based on my thoughts of the original series being like, no, that's kind of like a once you're in that world, there is no going back type of thing. Which now that this blob monster has shown up, it's the harbinger of hell. It seems like it's in Angela Wu's body. And what's interesting, because I was wondering what they were going to do with that, but I also was wondering, because remember when Maggie read her thoughts? I don't know whether that was just because like she was in constant pain in her condition, or maybe that thing, because the last time we saw that thing was at the beginning of the episode, so at some point it might have possessed her, and maybe that was kind of representing like it was taking over her at that point in time. I don't know. That whole other shit, it could be implying that it's her when in actuality it could be someone else. I feel, it could be more so like a red herring of like, oh, that's just her waking up from her condition. We'd ultimately have to wait and see in that regard. But when it was all kind of said and done, as I was talking about with all this, we do see that Maggie is a lot more assertive. She kind of puts her, like, it's like there's no more like majority rules. It's like we're kind of all in this together. Like I said, the whole kind of having to pick side. It's like, no, we're all in this together. But Maggie gives Mel advice about the whole Nico situation, as well as giving Macy advice about the Galvin situation. And she also handles the whole Brian situation of like, hey, like, I gotta do what I feel is right. And so she ends things just because because there's probably a part of her that's like, no. Like, she was so unsure about everything. So that's why she kind of kept going back to him. So kind of making a clean break of it is kind of the right choice for her, So I'm curious to see whether anything else comes about that or not. But I'm very interested to see where all of this takes us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.